Moon Knight, episode 3. We are at the halfway point of this series, and it's starting to feel like he's going to come back. They kind of just openly said Oscar Isaac wasn't tied to a contract, but I feel like this isn't going to be the last time we see him. They finally started to unravel the larger Marvel mythos into this episode, which I know is going to make a lot of people happy. Personally, I don't really care. It doesn't add anything or take away anything from you with this experience, but it's going to make some people happy. So episode 3, things kind of pick up. And I know people have been defending this show and saying it's the best, but this one in particular, it really falls into the Marvel formula, and I think that's why people are saying it's their favorite. Like, I wasn't the biggest fan of the first episode, and I think the second one was kind of like weirdly paced and did some interesting choices. This one is very much in the formula we've seen, especially towards a certain scene in like the middle. It felt very much like Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I'm not complaining. I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that's a bad choice. It's just very noticeable, like, oh, you're clearly trying to do this kind of thing, and that could sometimes hinder your actual flow of the story. So a couple things, like I did say, the larger Marvel universe does get some play in here, and I know it's going to make some people happy. And I watch all these groups. I'm in the Reddits. I'm in the Facebook groups. I'm on the Twitters. I'm seeing everything people are saying about Moon Knight. The fans are mad about the Mr. Knight identity. Why? This is something I really dislike about the comic book community, especially when it comes to like the MCU and their adaptations. They make choices and people get mad about those choices without actually realizing the character they think is being destroyed isn't actually a real character. Mr. Knight in the comic book world is just a detective. It's just the Moon Knight persona in fancy clothes to either talk to a therapist, talk to like the police. It's not like this really interesting identity. It's just a white tuxedo. Why do we have to pretend like it's something it's not? So I don't understand why people are getting mad when Steven, who is a character who is still learning about this world, is kind of figuring out his steps and that'll be his suit. I don't understand why people are getting mad at that. It's fine. Like, that is the least of the show's problems, is how it handles that identity. What the real show's problem is the pacing. Because it's just a weirdly paced show. It goes to all these different areas and it's kind of like so fast. This feels very much like we have to recap an entire like 2 years of a character to get him to where we need him to be. And that can be a problem for some people. I know for me, it's not the best part of the show. But this episode, it's not bad. It does some interesting things that I'm sure some people are going to love. It does some things that I'm sure some people are going to dislike. So we are in Egypt throughout this episode. That's where we are. And I love that they did this. And this definitely speaks to why they got Mohammed Diab to do some of this work. Egypt feels like a real city. It doesn't feel like we're just in like the desert dunes of some place next to the big pyramids doing something dumb. It's a lively city. It feels authentic right down to the camera work. The shaky cam in this is phenomenal. There's a fight scene in like the middle of the episode where he's fighting some like just like ruffians from Egypt. And it looks so good. It looks like the action sequences you would see from those films. I'm trying to say like I don't want to say like Egyptian films, but like from that filmography, from people that film in that area of the world, it has that feel to it. The soundtrack is from that world. It's really unique, and that to me is like the one thing that kind of like separates this from the larger Marvel universe. That is the one thing that makes it really different, is that it feels authentically like it's not American made. And that is kind of rare to see in a big budget show like this, because even when we do our filming in like the UK or in Africa or in any of these other places, they still feel like an American production. This doesn't. And that's something that is really rare to see in a show this big and bold. So I gotta commend it for that. That's really impressive. The main persona in this episode is Mark Spector. I feel like we had to get here at some point because he's not doing a bad accent. He's doing fine. I do like it. I kind of wanted to bring this up earlier. I think this might be the perfect time to say it. So people are praising Oscar Isaac for his performance in this role, and he's doing phenomenal. I'm not going to discredit him at all. But I think people are mistaking like an Emmy-worthy performance, because in the MCU, all the performances are pretty bad. And I will stand by that. They are basically they're placeholder performances where you could get any actor to do that work, except maybe for when you can just like get the right emotional beat and spots. Like, I will say it, you could get anybody to do any of the roles because they're all pretty generic. And when it comes to what we're seeing here with Mark Spector and Stephen Grant in that performance, it feels like Oscar Isaac is giving a lot of a role and like performing his ass off and doing like an Emmy-worthy performance, because to the contrast of everything else we've seen in the MCU, he's like giving one of the best performances of a career. But it's really just that he's talented. He's not just reading the lines and trying to be silly or funny. He's looking at this character and realizing there's turmoil in him from the basic instruction of the character. It's not like he's learning a lesson. He knew from the get-go his character was flawed, and that's how he's playing it. So that's why it looks like he's giving a really great performance. He's giving a solid performance. Just compared to everything else we've seen in this universe, it's a godsend. It's literally just the best stuff, because the rest of it is pretty bad. And that's not saying people don't give good performances. Come at me all you want. I will stand by that. So yes, Mark Spector is the main persona in here. He's going through Egypt trying to figure out where they're going to find the dig site. We get the Arthur Harrow stuff where he's finding like where a mutt's buried and they're going to like dig her up and all this stuff. And it's very interesting. I do like the way they're presenting Konchu in this episode too, because he's just kind of like the chill friend. He's like in the backseat. Like, I guess we could like get the gods together. I could use like my power to bring them here and we could talk to them about stuff. That's something we could do. And that's what they do. And we'll get to that in a bit here, because there's a couple other points I want to make before we get to the actual like weird in like celestial stuff. I've been reading some like thoughts online, and people are not liking Layla. Like, May Kalamawe is giving a fantastic performance as Layla, and people aren't liking it. She opens up this episode talking about her father, and it sounds like we're doing the archaeological dig where he gets killed by the mercenaries. I'm assuming that's where we're going to introduce, like, Bushman and have Mark be connected to that route. That's where he's going to meet Layla. If we flash back there, maybe if we just talk about it, I get it. She's pretty much the heart of this film. If she's not there, I think Mark becomes a less interesting character, just because he is destructive and we don't see that destruction affecting the real world. Because without Layla, he's just an eternally brooding asshole, and Layla kind of brings out the humanity in that, and she's an important asset for that reason. But she's just a fun character. Like, I like Marlene, and I've always said that you should give the romantic side to the Moon Knight character, but Marlene was very one-dimensional. She was the love interest who, you know, like met up with Steven in the hot tub. She was the one who's the damsel in distress. You can't do that today. And if you do, it's not an interesting character. So the fact that she's like actively involved in these worlds, she knows about Madripoor, that is something to do. That is giving her some actual characterization, and it works well because she's bouncing off these characters really interestingly, and she's giving a fantastic performance. So I do like that, and she's probably my favorite character of this world. And I'm a Marlene supporter. I like Layla a little bit more because she's a real character. So that's something I'm very impressed with. I do like that. The other thing is, this is the big thing I was kind of talking about in the last episode too. Where is the third personality? Well, there's a scene at the beginning where neither Steven or Mark understand what happened to these thugs he was fighting. He kills them. But it's not Mark that kills them, and Steven is obviously a pacifist kind of energy. So who killed them? Neither of them know, which leads to the thing I said in the last episode. I think Jake is actively in here somewhere, and we're going to set him up as the tease for the end. And I kind of read this online. I will say I follow Moon Knight Corps, and I watch all their stuff. They were saying they better not make Jake Lockley like the villain persona where he's actively fighting against himself. I don't think that's the case either. I think it's going to be like he is just like the flight or fight mode. When there's a tough decision that needs to be made and neither of these guys can do it, Jake's going to show up and just be like, pish posh, we're done. Let's go home. I think that's what we're going to see here, and I have no doubts we're going to see him operate in his own suit. If I had to guess the suit we're going to see for Jake Lockley, it's going to be like the black and white one. You know, kind of like the Marvel Now era stuff, like from the Alice run. I think that's the suit we're going to see. Because that's a cool suit, too. It looks pretty nice. It leads into the darkness that is that character. Very cool. So there's the big thing that happens. In order to like pretty much figure out where we have to go, we have to summon all the gods together to hear Konchu's plea. So he moves some stuff around in the moon, literally changes the way the moon looks, and it takes all the avatars to the inside of the pyramid where they all have a big council confrontation with the gods. Interesting choice. But I completely understand the need to do this. This is the side of the Moon Knight character that I don't really enjoy just because it's so American godsy, you know, just like, oh, the gods on Earth, herpty derp. We've seen it a million times. Everybody has done this story. Great writers have done this story worse. Great writers have done this story better. There is nothing about it that's really special or interesting. But when you have all the avatars together and have them being like speaking through these people, it's kind of cool. I don't know every one of the gods we have show up there. Osiris is one of the big ones. That's probably like a key one that we see show up. But the one version of Bastet shows up as like the love goddess who had a thing with Konchu. Very cool. Arthur Harrow shows up, literally denounces everything that Mark is about. And that to me, like I was just saying earlier, how like Oscar Isaac's giving a great performance compared to everyone else. That's the scene where he's showing he's great. Because it's a man who knows he needs help trying to prove to the world that his issues are not the reason things are falling apart. That's a great scene. That's a powerful scene. That's a really cool moment. And he gets another one later on where they're kind of like figuring out how to like read this like inscription writing from this like papers and stuff, where he kind of like switches from Mark to Steven in a moment's notice. I know people are going to be citing that moment as like, that's some great acting. It's fine. He just changes like from a frown to a smile. Like, anybody can do that under the right circumstance. It's hard to do it convincingly. He did a good job at that. So yes, the gods don't like Konchu. They denounce him again. They're like, Harrow, you may not be a bad guy or you may be a good guy, who cares? But this Mark fella, this Konchu guy, they suck. But there might be some inscription on the tomb of some other god that could be able to figure it out and save the day. So we have to go to a Madripoor-like scene, and we meet Anton Mogar. And this was... Sadly, when Gaspard Ulliel was cast as Midnight Man, he has passed away, given to a ski accident literally months before the release of this film. It was really cool. That sequence, I think, was really strong. Gaspard was given a great performance. Just that confidence you see kind of like the Batroc type character, which I really like to see. Just on horseback, like jousting for some reason. That was incredible. And it leads to a really good action sequence, which I am hesitant to say is... good. Okay, it is good. It looks good. It is shot really well. The fight scene is great. It does lend into this thing that I've kind of been saying from the beginning, is the marketing material was this dark and bloody thing where he's like holding on to like the crescent moon. There's blood dripping from it. And then he gets stabbed by a bunch of these spears and there's no blood or no real anything happening to it. It falls into this problem that every MCU character falls into, where they're bulletproof. That's some really bad tension. It's just really lazy because it doesn't feel like anything then. Part of the Moon Knight character, and I know I don't want to compare the two, but part of the Moon Knight character is that he will take the punch. He will accept the blows and take them. And we see that in here when Mark kind of like lets Steven try to fake it. He gets stabbed with the spears and suddenly he reverts back to Mark. That's him taking the punch. And he's willing to sacrifice himself that way. But the fact that like a billion bullets can shoot at him, they can bounce off his cape and like ricochet back to the people that fired them, that kind of sucks. Like that doesn't feel like anything. That just kind of adds the tension away. Now, we could be setting up the fact, because this episode ends with like Konchu being like entombed in a stone, that now he doesn't have those magical powers that Konchu bestows upon him. So he is no longer bulletproof, and that could be something we see where he gets really bloody and battered, and maybe he spends the last little bit here trying to free Konchu. That could be cool. And maybe that's why he starts to take the licks and he starts to take the blows and he starts to get bloody and beat up. So the next time somebody stabs him in the back of a spear, it actually breaks him and he can't like survive it. Like maybe that's where we're going. I think that's where it could be going. That could be kind of cool to see too. I did enjoy that. There, like I said, Konchu does kind of get imprisoned here in this really interesting scene, because before that they have to like line up the constellations to something that happened 2,000 years ago. Konchu just changes everything on Earth, and so like we just see the stars from that timeline. The gods are like, don't do that, now you're imprisoned in a tomb. Very interesting idea, and I kind of like it. Like, I know there's like some hesitance that you see here. Is Konchu a god or not? They do mention like the other void, which is like where these gods come from. So that's interesting. They are leaning a lot into the Lemire run, which I'm surprising they're doing so early on. And I think, I know they've been teasing like we're going into like the mindscape where he's like in a mental institution. I think they're going there. We'll have to wait and see. But it's just kind of interesting that this is where it's going. It's a beautiful scene where they're like throwing the stars around. It's like just a beautiful landscape with this lights just flying all about. It looks really cool. It leads to some great tension. I did like that a lot. Very fun stuff. I did enjoy it. like this episode was strong. It had some good action beats. I think the camera work really saved it just because it felt unique to itself as opposed to the generic stuff it has been up until that point. I think you see more of Oscar Isaac's performance in some of like the quieter beats where he's giving some great delivery. There's a scene on the boat when him and Layla are like headed to this island, whatever the hell that the Midnight Man is on. And he's just talking about how he tried and he wanted to tell her and all this stuff, and it's not her problem, and talking about their marriage and their life. And those are the things we don't see enough of in these kind of programs anymore, because I don't understand why this happens in these comic book films. We just shake off all the stuff involving the romance of these characters. They are baked into the mythology. If you are doing an Indiana Jones adventure, which is what Kevin Feige said, you had Marion Ravenwood in there. She was an actual character fording around with Jones the whole time. So why the MCU wants to shy away from that, I don't understand, because it is those characters to be involved with the romantic entanglement. And I think like May is capturing the right elements that Karen did when it comes to like the Marion character. I just like that type of role because it could either just be written so poorly, which it has before, or really well done where it's actually playing off the actor. And I think let's compare it again to the Indiana Jones stuff, because I think it's a really strong performance from all the actors involved in both of those franchises. If we make Mark Spector our Indiana Jones character, and that means Layla is going to be our Marion Ravenwood, it is playing against like the old romance coming back into life to see them in a new way. Whereas when it was Indiana Jones, it was like this student that he fell in love with and broke the heart of. And when it's Layla, it is now like this ex-wife. They're still technically married, but there's the divorce papers, the ex-wife that could, start to reinvigorate the romance again. All really interesting stuff. Like, this episode was very fascinating. It did set up the larger universe. It got us all these different gods, which I'm sure some people are going to like, that we have all these gods showing up. To me, that's not the stuff I care about. When you just have like, oh no, is Jake Lockley running around killing people and like forcing children to fall off a building? When you have like an actual cult leader denouncing everything Mark is about, breaking it to the point where he's like, I do need help, and maybe now the gods are going to imprison him in this tomb of his own mind because he can't find his help. That's the stuff I like, because that's the character. This is broken identity of a man struggling to fit in, and the fact that he has a wife that he's trying to find love for again is very compelling. His god is in his head doing all these weird stuff. I don't really care if Konchu can like manipulate literal time in the sky. That doesn't matter to me. It is an interesting shot, and it works really cool. Like that sequence where he turns into the stone, that was awesome, and it looks really good. So as good as this episode is, I hope it kind of like devolves into a more personal story, as opposed to every single god's got their avatar on Earth, and suddenly it's just gonna be like, are we all gonna just like team up and beat up Arthur, or suddenly gonna become a story of like Steven and Mark working together to figure out how to get Konchu back out? I hope that's the case, because that's an interesting thing to see, and I hope we see him get injured more, because I like that he can like survive those big like explosions and those stabbings, and it's a cool scene when they're trying to like attack Layla and he's trying to break through all like the things that stabbed him. But I want to see some more stakes in that. I don't mean like literal stakes where he's getting stabbed. I mean like I want to see stakes where if he is in a fight there is consequences for it, because right now it's every other thing in the MCU where everything just bounces off whatever the hell and does nothing, and I'm fine with it. It's not a bad thing. But where's the stakes in that? If this is going to be like our boots on the ground character, let's have some boots on the ground. Not a man who can just, like get stabbed in the chest 4 times by big stakes and then walk away. I want to see some consequences, is all I'm saying. I think we're going to be getting there. I think from here on out, the show is going to be taking a drastic turn in a certain direction. Maybe not a frolicking, globe-trotting adventure to take down a cult leader trying to resurrect a crocodile lady. Maybe just the route that's going to get a little more silly. Maybe just the route that we're going to dive into the personality of this man and learn more about it. Maybe we should actually just say the words dissociative identity disorder, and not like it's a thing that's holding Mark back, but more as it's like an idea of how he can cope with this thing. They do kind of set up a little bit of Layla there, but come on. Actually say it. Actually, to say this man's unwell, don't just call him crazy in front of all these avatars. Let him deal with his trauma, maybe grow from it, maybe heal from it, or maybe realize there's another creepy man running around in his mind. Do one of those things, because those are the things that are going to make your audience stay. Because if it just becomes another just like The Crow, where it's just a guy running around, That's not fun. That's going to get stale really quick. You got to make them a little more interesting. But keep up the camera work because it's really good. And that is going to do it for this review of Moon Knight Episode 3. Now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.
All demon, face the vengeance of the Moon Knight.